I propose the general process is that the vice chair assumes the chairing of the meeting. So we'll continue.
And that would be me. So we'll continue the meeting. And I now give the floor to the member for Carleton.
Now, I'm optimistic.
On January 14th, the Supreme Court of Canada will hear a precedent-setting case that could decide whether rulings by the Ethics Commissioner are subject to judicial review at all. The issue before the court is related to the controversial We Charity scandal back in 2020. Specifically, it is ruling on whether judges can review the Ethics Commissioner's decision that cleared Justin Trudeau. If so, this case could open up a significant avenue of accountability for the government that was otherwise not available.
Let's take a look. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a press release that Democracy Watch released the other day, and this essentially is a mini brief as to what's going on. So it says Democracy Watch at Supreme Court this week versus Ethics Commissioner's ruling that ignored Prime Minister Trudeau's violation in We Charity grant approval. Stage 1 hearing of this case is about whether errors in Ethics Commissioner rulings can be challenged in court when government tries to prohibit challenges. Federal ethics law prohibits all conflicts of interest and improper decisions, including improper apparent conflicts that Trudeau had with We Charity.
Monday, January 12th, 2026, Ottawa. Democracy Watch announced that its Stage 1 appeal in the court case it filed in June 2021 will be heard by the Supreme Court of Canada, or SCC, Wednesday and Thursday. The case challenges Ethics Commissioner Mario Dionne's May 2021 ruling on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's participation in the We Charity grant approval process because the commissioner made 4 key errors in letting Trudeau off, even though Trudeau clearly violated the federal government ethics laws. The appeal is SCC file number 41576, and the hearing is at the SCC in Ottawa at 301 Wellington Street.
And here it gives the times for the hearings themselves. And you can watch the hearing online by clicking on that link that is in the description of this video under sources that we used. So this talks about the fact that Democracy Watch is represented by Sujit Choudhury of Circle Barristers and Paul Daly of the University of Ottawa. And what this goes over is this first part talks about the fact that Democracy Watch first filed this, or tried to, back in 2021. And the Attorney General of Canada at the time, which is essentially the Minister of Justice, tried to block that actual filing. I wonder why.
Why indeed?
And he essentially said that Democracy Watch did not have standing to be able to challenge it in court. Now, if you recall back to when we were talking about the prorogation hearing and the different parties that were in that and whether they had standing or not, standing essentially means, are you even relevant? Are you the appropriate party or one of the appropriate parties that can actually bring a challenge like this? The Attorney General of Canada was trying to say, no, they do not. What happened next is in December of 2022, Justice Stratus of the Federal Court of Appeal actually did say that Democracy Watch did have standing and decided that they could pursue the case. However, in 2023, what the Federal Court of Appeal ruled was that, well, you have to consider what's called Stage 1. And that is whether or not the court could actually rule on a case like this because it is kind of political in nature. And it had to consider that fact. So eventually in 2024, the court decided that, well, you don't. You can't really do that, and this is a political issue, and any appeals of the Ethics Commissioner should be filed with the Prime Minister and Parliament.
Yeah, the guy that's accused of the ethics breach. That makes sense.
Right. So let's just play this out. So, okay, Ethics Commissioner. investigating whether or not the Prime Minister broke the ethics laws and broke the conflicts of interest. No, you didn't. Okay, so I would like to appeal that. Mr. Prime Minister, can you review the Ethics Commissioner's findings on whether you broke the Conflict of Interest Act? Because we believe that he's wrong and you in fact did. We would like you to review his findings and overturn that. Oh, you know what? Maybe I did. Maybe I did. Oh, that's right. The Ethics Commissioner is wrong. I did violate the Conflict of Interest Act.
Right? Because like depending on what the results are, this could wind up in fines, wind up in jail time, wind up completely disgraced. Like, what Prime Minister is going to be like, oh yeah, let's open that right back up?
And over and above that, it still doesn't matter even if it's not the Prime Minister, because in almost all cases, it's going to be somebody in his government that is going to be subject to these laws and breaking these laws, because nobody from the opposition can really be violating the conflict of... I guess they can.
Yeah, they can.
But it's less frequent because they're not going to be in positions where they're making decisions in cabinet and that sort of thing. I guess they still can when it comes to, you know, financial benefits and disclosure and things like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, who's to say, you know, big bad businessman can't go to a member of a non-governing party, so somebody in the opposition, and be like, you know, here's a huge sum of money to vote in Parliament the way I want you to vote. And you know what? I've got 10 of your colleagues doing the same, so it'll pass. That, I think, would be a huge conflict of interest and also very, very illegal. And
remember what we always say about legislation is you have to assume the extremes on either side. You can't assume the probability of something happening. You have to assume, well, what if you have a very benevolent Prime Minister and government, and then you have to consider the possibility of what if you have a very nefarious Prime Minister and government. So if you have a very nefarious Prime Minister and government, then you're going to assume that in all cases where it's somebody on the opposition, he's always going to rule on the favor of the opposition being punished. And if he is ruling on any cases that involve people in his government or himself, that he's always going to be ruling that they are innocent. So that's the case of the nefarious Prime Minister. That's the issue you have to look at. So this is why Democracy Watch is bringing this forward. Now, the great thing is that they asked the Supreme Court of Canada to review this and to allow the case to proceed. And in a lot of cases, it's actually denied. But like the prorogation case, it actually was ruled that it could proceed, which is where we are. And this brings us here. So this is where Democracy Watch is going to be arguing, and they've already submitted arguments beforehand for the Supreme Court of Canada, but they're going to be arguing before the Supreme Court of Canada that the courts do have jurisdiction and they can rule on ethics commissioner cases. They're not going to be ruling tomorrow specifically on the arguments in the ethics commissioner's report on Justin Trudeau and whether or not he did or did not violate the act. They are arguing whether or not the court should be able to review that and make a ruling on it. And so in addition to Democracy Watch, they have 8 citizen organizations as interveners on the appeal. So that means that there's 8 different parties that are either for or against these arguments on whether or not the courts can intervene and rule and review the ethics commissioner's rulings. So this is going to be a pretty significant case. And there's a quote here by Duff Conacher that's coming up that we are going to read, but we move forward.
The ruling on this Stage 1 issue in the case will set a precedent that will not only determine whether Democracy Watch's Stage 2 case challenging errors in the Ethics Commissioner's Trudeau We Charity ruling will go ahead, but also will determine whether court cases can challenge errors in the rulings of any agency, board, commission, or tribunal that has a, quote, partial privative clause, end quote, in the statute that governs it.
And this is where Duff Conacher is quoted, and on his outcomes of this argument coming up this week.
Quote, we are arguing that it would be absurd to appeal to the Prime Minister and MPs to have them review errors in a ruling by the Ethics Commissioner, especially when the ruling, as in this case, involves the Prime Minister, who would be judging his own actions, end quote, said Duff Conacher, co-founder of Democracy Watch. Quote, "We say that insisting that an ethics commissioner ruling about any federal cabinet minister, ministerial staff person, or cabinet appointee can only be reviewed by federal politicians is an inadequate safeguard for the rule of law and the profoundly important federal government ethics law." End quote. Quote, "Hopefully the Supreme Court will overturn the Federal Court of Appeals ruling and allow the case to go ahead challenging the Ethics Commissioner's ruling on Prime Minister Trudeau's participating in the We Charity grant approval, and also set a precedent that allows all future cases challenging of errors in rulings by the Ethics Commissioner and all agencies, boards, commissioners, and tribunals across Canada to ensure that they always enforce the law properly," end quote, said Conacher.
Now, I'm optimistic because they have something very significant on their side, and that's the prorogation hearing. Because in the prorogation hearing, which is, I would say, that is a more political issue than you're looking at ethics cases that the ethics commissioner is looking at. The argument was essentially the same. Well, this is no business of the courts. This is completely political, so therefore the courts should not be reviewing this whatsoever. And the courts disagreed. And so that is a very helpful argument for Democracy Watch and the lawyers and counsel that are arguing this, because this was very, very recent and it was in Canadian law. So that is going to be very helpful for this. So I'm optimistic about it. And they also can just make the argument, listen, one of the ethics commissioner's main duties is to investigate based on the Conflict of Interest Act. How do you then almost violate that act by then saying the people that he's investigating are the judge, jury, and executioner of the appeals of that investigation? Because if you uphold that, you're literally violating the Conflict of Interest Act as it is written.
Isn't that insane?
So, in my opinion, both from a procedural standpoint and a precedent standpoint when it comes to the prorogation hearing, there's very good grounds for the Supreme Court of Canada to cement this as, yes, the courts can review this. Now, that's going to be the outcome of this week. Yes or no, whether the courts can review. If they say yes, it can. Now Democracy Watch is in business. Now you get to stage 2, which is, okay, so now that the courts can review this, let's get to stage 2 and now see whether or not the ethics commissioner did rule correctly based on these 4 criteria. So we're not going to get knee deep into that today. We'll revisit that after the hearings are over, but we are going to go back in time at one of the most famous clips of Pierre Poilievre leading up to his eventual leadership bid for the Conservative Party. And I think a lot of people, after seeing this clip, they knew who was the guy to challenge Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party when the Conservative leadership became available.
Prime Minister, you twice were found guilty of breaking the Ethics Act. After those 2 convictions, did you decide to read the act?
You got 14 seconds, Prime Minister.
Yes, I have read the act a number of times.
Are you aware of Section 21?
Yes, since I've read the act, I'm aware of Section 21.
What does it say?
I can pull it up for you, but if you have it in front of you, you'll know.
Well, it says a public office holder of which you are one shall recuse himself or herself from any discussion, decision, debate, or vote in any matter in which, in respect of which he or she would be in a conflict of interest. Now, what you've admitted today is not just that you were in a conflict of interest, but that you consciously recognized in your May cabinet meeting that such a conflict might exist. That it didn't just slide by your desk, that you were consciously aware that there was an inappropriate link to your family that would put you in a conflict. Why did you, at that moment, not call the ethics commissioner and recuse yourself?
So, just to recap the We Charity scandal for those that may not remember or those that may not know about it at all. So, way back in 2020, there was this new program called the Canada Student Service Grant, and it was a $912 million student loan grant or student scholarship grant that was being administered or going to be administered by the government. And Trudeau and the Liberals had decided, well, let's get a third party to administrate this instead. So who did they get? Well, they got this thing called the We Charity. And the problem with that is Trudeau's brother and mother had been paid tens of thousands of dollars in speaking fees for these We Charity events, like many, many different events.
And if I recall correctly, Sophie Trudeau was also doing events, but whether or not she got paid, I don't know if that was clear.
Allegedly, she did. And Bill Morneau, Trudeau's finance minister at the time, had also gone on a trip that was completely paid for by the We Charity as well. And he kind of forgot to disclose that. And then when that came out, that all blew up. He got fired. Resigned, and eventually had to pay for the trip. Now the issue is even that, over and above all that, Trudeau, being friends with the people at We Charity, was in the cabinet meetings, and he's the one who actually approved it. And then when it came out that he did approve this, and this was what happened, he said, oh, well, yeah, you know, I probably should have recused myself. But that's okay. Everything was handled fine and appropriately. And this is where everyone said, what? And this is where the whole scandal blew up, and everything came to a head. Now, there was so much pressure that actually came from this scandal that the We Charity guys actually backed out. So much so that they folded up shop in Canada and got out of Dodge. And the whole CSSG program just completely folded up. So there was no grants that were put out. And that was it. And the parliamentary investigation concluded, and the ethics commissioner's report came out as was the case. So that was the whole scandal. So that's just some background, and let's get to the fun stuff.
That is simply not true, Mr. Poilievre. The issue of advancing issues for one's own. And by the way, the ethics commissioner is looking into this right now, and I fully trust his judgment on determining it. But at the same time, my concern around recusing myself was a question around perceptions, because I knew full well that this Canada Summer Students Grant Program was not going to directly benefit my mother or my brother.
Your 16 seconds are up. Your 16 seconds are up. I'm going to ask you again, because nobody believes you when you say you don't know how much money your family has got from the We Group. So you've had a month to look into that. You knew you were going to testify here. Again, how much money total have your brother, mother, and spouse received from this organization? How much?
That information has been publicly shared, but I will highlight.
Well, then tell me what it is.
My mother
how much
has
just the dollar figure
throughout her life.
The dollar figure, Prime Minister.
Various ways, and is
how much
of the work that she's done, and I'm proud of her.
How much? I'm looking for a dollar figure.
We can get that number for you if you like. It's been out in the media.
It's been in the media, but you don't know it?
I don't have it in front of me. And quite
you don't
frankly,
know how much your family has received from this organization, which you tried to give $500 million, really?
Can I answer, Mr. Poilievre?
I'm waiting. You haven't done an answer so far. Let's make this the first one.
My mother has worked as an advocate.
The dollar figure, Prime Minister.
Speaker for many good organizations across the country.
Mr. Prime Minister, you are being asked a direct question at a parliamentary committee.
Support her because she does her own work, and I'm proud of her work. Point of order. I do not feel that it is my responsibility to peer into the work my mother is doing, because I have
point of order to suspend.
She's doing.
Point of order to suspend.
I've come to learn that the chairperson's power has gone out and is no longer part of this meeting. May I propose that we?
Okay, we can keep. Prime Minister and I can continue talking.
No.
I suspected that might be a problem. It's very convenient timing for the lights to go out.
Look, I got a message to the effect that his power has gone out. I have no reason to distrust him.
I hope you don't pull the fire alarm now.
Yeah, well, look, there's no intent in my own private home here in the middle of a pandemic. I don't have a fire alarm. I propose
The general process is that the vice chair assumes the chairing of the meeting. So we'll
And
continue.
that would be me. So we'll continue the meeting. And I now give the floor to the member for Carleton.
This is like one of the classic.
I haven't
classic
seen
moments.
this in a while. I forgot that he was the vice chair.
The best part of that is when Julian said, normally the vice chair, takes over, and he says, and that would be me, and therefore I give the floor to the member of Carleton, which was himself.
Well, and the funny thing is, Julian was like so trepidatious about it, like, traditionally. Because he knew it was Pierre too.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
And it's funny, like, because Pierre says, well, the prime minister, and I can keep talking, and Sorbert was like, no. But you see the panic on Fraser's face and Sorbert's face. They're just like, Trudeau's getting creamed. No one's interrupting because they're like we don't know what to do here. and this just went on. It went on and on. But this was definitely one of those classic moments. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. Fingers crossed. As I said, I'm optimistic based on the arguments, based on the precedent in the prorogation case. So fingers crossed, see what happens. And we're looking forward to connect with Duff and Democracy Watch. And we wish them all the best and all the luck in the world. And hopefully the law and justice is on their side. And we can continue this case over to stage 2, where we can really get to the bottom of some of these arguments, and hopefully we can start to move towards some sort of accountability for our government, because what we've seen is there's no accountability inside the government. So clearly we need some help and some accountability from the judicial branch, and at this point I'll take any accountability.